Well, welcome to the 92nd Street Y. Let's get down to cases, as Groucho used to say. All over the country, people are debating the institution of marriage and who should be married to whom. So I want to put the issue on the table. Are you for or against same-party marriage?
I think we're just for parties.
You know, sometimes there's a cliche, and it's true. It's love conquers all. The most important thing in a marriage is you got to love your spouse. People get married, religious people marry atheists, people of different religions, people don't like their in-laws, people don't like the children from another marriage, people don't like this, they don't like that. If you don't like the person you're married to, that's the worst. That's bad. The other stuff, and I always say, you always hear about these people that can't stand their in-laws. And I tell people, you know, easier to be married to a woman that hates my politics and hates my mother.
Hold on a second. I need to start writing some things down.
I love his mother and his 5 sisters, even though they've totally spoiled him. I just had to get one thing straight before we got married. I am not going to treat you the way your sisters treat you. When I first met them, he plopped down on my couch. He went put one hand out like this. One of the sisters got him a cigarette. He put another hand out, another one got him a maker's mark on the rocks. A third one lit his cigarette, and I said, okay, I am so out of here.
I mean, the political stuff, that's nothing. Yeah, that's fine. So you've written a book, and a very interesting book, a fun book, about your relationship. I'm not usually in the habit of asking about relationships. Seems sometimes out of school, but since we're on the topic, James, was Mary your first Republican?
You know, let me say this. I'm statistically, I'm sure there's somebody else I haven't found. I was 49 when I got married, and I've only been married once, which that doesn't happen very often. And I was single in every kind of way. It was really like a single guy.
Don't ask, don't tell.
Right.
We don't need any more details.
And she, when we met, and it didn't, and she was the one, we were actually at a dirt car racing track, and she told me to get on my knees, and she gave me a ring, and she said, I put this on my finger. And I had said no since. That's a true story. I mean, it really kind of happened that way. And we got married, and she said, well, and she was the one that wanted to get married in New Orleans. You know, that was her. She loved New Orleans as much as I did, even before we met. That was not my deal, right?
Was there any notion in those early years of, is this happening? Is this gonna happen? Am I gonna do this?
Get married?
And how can one prepare for the notion that people who you do not know you, are commenting on your marriage?
That's so very rude. I mean, I really don't.
Yeah.
I think we're all informed, sophisticated audience here. You never heard me say anything about the Clinton indiscretion, whatever. I only said to my husband at one point, he lied to you, that's what I care about. And he said to me, honey, if I did something that stupid with a girl that young, I'd lie about it too. I said, that, not the best thing to say to a wife, but I don't. A postpartum wife, I might say, after having our second baby at age 45, which made him so crazy I had to stop pushing to ask for an epidural for him. That's so I did not like initially our union being called a stunt marriage, and even this is after we had children, it was still a stunt marriage. I guess some will see if it's still a stunt, but I was 40, he was 49. We knew what we were doing. Yeah. Marriage is tough stuff, but things were not quite as acrimonious then as they are today in Washington.
You know, you bring a point. we're in the public square. When people come in, they run for office, and they go, gee, I had no idea it was going to be like this. Then where in the hell were you? It's always like this. If you throw yourself in the public square, you defend your clients, you attack other people, you're on television, you're doing it, people are going to comment on you. It just comes with the territory. That's the way it is.
Right.
And so we got married. It was one guy, I think it was Walter Shapiro, who said, the unique thing is not that they married each other. The unique thing would be, two political people in Washington. If one of them would have married a tree surgeon in Idaho. Right. I always wondered what my life would have been like if I'd have married a tree surgeon in Idaho, but at any rate. So I just view that as, you have the right to come up to me and say, hey, I really agree with you. I really don't agree with you very much, but something, as long as you're kind of, when you're in a public square, you're a little bit like a national park. You can use me, you just can't abuse me. You don't. And I understand that. And if people comment or have observation, well, I don't know how you could be married to her, or how she marries him, or this and that, that's fine, go ahead, I don't care.
The day you got married, what's the funniest thing that someone said to you that day? A colleague of yours, or someone who you'd worked against, maybe?
I think James mentioned we got married in New Orleans.
On Thanksgiving, right?
Yeah, so we don't remember much of anything that was said. The first thing I remember is finding his brother, who had passed out in his car with the engine running and the door open, his sister, who had to go to a funeral the next morning, and when she came to our after-wedding lunch, her husband said, "You look worse than Aunt," whoever it was, and no one disagreed. So it was just fun. The particular funnies, I'm hard-pressed to remember.
Uncle John M., who was probably 91 at the time, and Richard Simmons was in New Orleans, and he had a limo with the door open, and Uncle John M. thought it was a call for him and got in Richard Simmons' car. And if you knew Uncle John M. and you knew Richard Simmons, it was not exactly.
Not a match made in heaven. In the book, Mary, you write about the year 1993, and I quote, it was a schizophrenic world in which I was madly in love with him, but simultaneously hated every inch of his skinny Cajun being. You're a sweet talker.
Okay, here's how it would go. It wasn't like that was my first rodeo. I'd been in politics for 12, 15 years or whatever. I've been chief of staff to the Republican National Committee when Lee Atwater had brain cancer. I'd done some things.
Right.
I'd worked on many presidential campaigns. When Poppy Bush 41, started losing, that's what happens on campaigns, and you've seen it before. It's not peculiar to Republicans or Democrats. Everybody jumps ship, or nobody wants to go out there and defend. I was not a public person, a communications person. I was the ground soldier. I was the organizer. But because nobody else would defend him, I would go on TV to do all the defense. And it was I loved that man, and it was more than what politics, I think, sometimes is today, which is a career. It was a cause. Right. And so when it was over, I was not only devastated personally, but because I was the face of that losing campaign, I could not get another job. So for the first time since I was 11, I had no job, no prospects of a job, no income, a mortgage. Nobody would return my phone calls. And the only time I could go out was to go out with him, where every place we went, stars would of course his mother and his 5 sisters came to everything, okay? Lighting his cigarettes, pouring his bourbon. Movie stars swooning to be. The coup de grace was Kim Basinger. I don't know if I put that story in there.
Yes.
I'm like, are you kidding me? She was so beautiful. I just couldn't stop staring at her. James Carville, can I just get next to James Carville? I'm like, you know what? Take my James, you can have it. So it was, I must have been pretty much in love with you, because it was... well,
it was 20 years ago, so...
Did you ever watch The War Room together?
If we watched it together or not,
No, but I'll tell you, the night that I did not speak to him after he called several times the night we lost. At about whatever, the sun was coming up, and many vodkas later, I'm laying on the floor trying to fall asleep, and I turn on the TV, and guess what was on? The crying scene that ended up in the war room of James Carville. I said, I can't get away from him. I can't get away from him. No, we've never watched it together. We don't watch election nights together. The only thing we really like to watch together are the Saints. So, who dat?
Yeah. You talk a lot, or you wrote a lot in the book about your admiration for the first President Bush. And this is with passion. This is not just about politics. This is with passion for a man who you genuinely respect. And James, during the '92 campaign, the quote was, he was part of a sleazy little cabal. So my question is,
Did I say that?
how does that work? When one spouse, or both of you in the public eye, disparages the hero, and I'm paraphrasing there, the hero of the other spouse.
Well, didn't you call him a philandering, pot-smoking, something or another, something or another, something?
No.
Well, hold on. We were going to get to that.
I specifically said, I never called him a philandering, pot-smoking.
Yeah, I know.
But honestly, you know what President Clinton said when the Clintons had a lovely engagement party for us, even though he still could not look at me, he was still mad. And to this day, and we are friends, and even though he's a vegan, he likes to come to New Orleans and sneak in some dishes every once in a while. We respect loyalty in our profession, and that's part of being loyal. And President Bush told me I couldn't be negative about President Clinton. He didn't want me to be negative, so I thought I was pretty restrained.
Yeah, you know, political people, like every other thing, have a culture, and you understand people on the other side, and really the people when I came through the system that you hated, but the kind of sniveling people who leaked or who kind of tried to parse, or you know what I mean? So if somebody was hard-hitting and passionate about their side, you actually kind of had some amount of respect for them. And you didn't like the people who lacked sort of commitment or kind of passion. And you work on a campaign, and it's like anything else. You become very attached to the candidate. You become very attached to people. And one of the really rewarding things from that '92 campaign, there are like 7 of us that literally talk on the phone 4 or 5 times a week. Mm-hmm. Still do. And you forge those kinds of relationships. I mean, that's the really unique thing. When you're in the crucible of a political campaign, everything that you do, you almost literally live together, you work all day, it's the kind of thing. And that's a really rewarding thing about my life in politics, is I look back on the relationship. I mean, it was really cool to be sitting there and saying, gee, I'm in the middle of like the biggest show that there is, you know, a kid from Carville, Louisiana being here. But when I really look back on my time in politics, is that the people that I met, the relationships I forged, and it is there being, you know, the prime example right there. So I kind of look at politics a little bit different than other people do, because I always grew up wanting to be a political operative. That was what I sort of aspired to be. I never realized I'd be involved in a presidential campaign, but that's what I really liked. I liked the whole theater. Maybe it was coming from Louisiana, and the larger-than-life characters that we knew were politicians. The really entertaining, funny, smart people were politicians, and maybe it's just the sort of culture I grew up in.
Look, here, this story is not in the book, and the book is not about the '92 campaign. It's going forward, but speaking to the inside, how the culture works. The last weekend before the election, James and I were on separate Sunday shows opposite each other. And then we're going right from the Sunday shows to I don't know where. So I come back to Air Force One, and the aide says, President Bush wants to see you right now. wants to talk to you about James, wants to talk to you about your boyfriend. I'm like, oh, no, what did he do? So I go to his cabin and I said, I'm sorry, Mr. President, whatever he said, whatever the worst punishment is I can think of, which we don't need to share here, but I think I will give it to him. He goes, no, you know what he said? James was asked, I think, by Schieffer, can you say one nice thing about President Bush? And without hesitation, or maybe hesitation, I don't know, but the way Poppy Bush told the story is that James said, anybody that Mary Matalin loves as much as she loves Poppy Bush, there must be something really great about him.
I tell you.
That's a good line.
One of the most terrifying people that I've ever met is Mrs. Bush. And she she doesn't get over things. So about a year and a year and a half ago, the Bush Library people, I've done it at the Reagan Library too, actually. It was the second time we went over there and did a thing, and so we went up and they have like an apartment there. And so we get the seating arrangement, and I'm sitting next to her.
Now, she had a nickname for you, right? Which you talk about in the book.
He who, for 10 years she called him, he who shall not be named. And so I see the Bushes then and still regularly. So how's he who shall not be named up until this night?
I had to sit next to her, and I'm going to tell you, I was terrified. And she stood up and made a few remarks and said some really nice things about me, and I'm like, phew.
Wait, so was that before or after? Didn't you had him as like a surprise guest?
This is I am a risk taker. This is a pretty big risk to take. I was giving a commencement speech for the Aggies, and Poppy Bush, this is no secret, gets off step on occasion. And I had been told that he was sort of in and out of it. So I said to, I called his chief aide and I said, let's not tell him, let's not tell her, Mrs. Bush, let's not tell anybody. I'm just going to bring James as a surprise to the Aggies. So when I got done with my speech, and this is hardly James Carville friendly territory, so then I have a special guest, and I brought him out, and they went crazy. What do they do there? Hoo-ha? What does they say? How do they hoo-ha?
The Aggie.
Yeah, they all went crazy, and it made Poppy Bush so happy. He's immobilized physically, but he's got this red scooter. I don't know if I put this story in the book. He chased me down the hall in high heels in his red scooter. He was so happy, trying to run me over. And all he wanted to do was drink vodka martinis with James.
You know, I'm sorry I did not put this story in the book about a guy I work with real closely, a former legendary CIA agent. But he's retired now. And he said, we're actually in Bogota, doing some work down there. And he said, you know President Bush, the 41? I said, yeah, I met him. He says, what do you think of him? I said, it's not the same party, but he's a good guy. He said, I agree. He says, in 1989, he said, the CIA, we work out of embassies. I said, yeah, I know that. He said, I was working out of the French embassy, and President Bush showed up. It was the 200th year anniversary of the French Revolution. Mm-hmm. And he talked to the embassy personnel. And he finished his speech, and at the end he said, and I'm going to be leaving Paris tomorrow, and I'm going to The Hague or Amsterdam to Holland. And so he asked the Q&A, and somebody asked the question in everybody's mind, hey, you're in Paris, it's 200th year anniversary. He said, Mr. President, why are you going to Holland, the Netherlands? He said, it's an interesting question. He said, when the United States started, the first country to ever recognize the United States was Holland. In fact, John Adams was our first ambassador, and his house is still there in Amsterdam. And he said, no American president has gone over there and thanked him, so I thought I was in the neighborhood and I'd thank him. Which I thought was a kind of classy thing to do, you know what I mean? If you're just going to be over there, you could go by and tell the Dutch, hey, how y'all doing,
In 1992 and 96, you were working, obviously, for the Republicans against Bill Clinton, and then you get invited to a state dinner at the White House during the course of the campaign, as you write in the book.
Oh, the one where I was 8 months pregnant, so I couldn't really. I had to feel all the pain because it was past the point of when you could. I was sort of waddling down the thing, and this is true. The principals by whom I mean the president, the first lady, such are fine, but the staffs never forgive you. So whenever I'd walk into the White House, which was rare, it'd be like, and it's just split. There's nothing between me and at the end of this long hallway. You've seen that long hall in press conferences is the president of these United States who makes a beeline for me, President Clinton, who proceeds to tell me and spends literally dominates the night with me, telling me how Bob Dole could beat him, Bill Clinton, laying out the entire strategy of how Dole should say this, and I put a very truncated version in there. It was very sophisticated, and I had like a notebook on my big fat belly, and I'm like, I got it. And he goes, and he's just a political junkie. I love the guy. I love speaking to him. I never miss an opportunity when he comes to town to talk to him. And she as well, a story thinking of, there are stories in this book, but one I didn't put in, because when we're on TV, you tend to force to speak so ill of others. But when we had our first baby, we got accidentally pregnant when I was 40. Who gets accidentally pregnant? I wasn't even thinking about it. I thought I had the flu. Oh, no, you're pregnant. So it was not an easy ordeal. And the first person to call the hospital, and there's nothing in it for her, and I've never told this story before, was Mrs. Clinton. I mean, these are people. These are people who understand that there are lives that are multidimensional beyond the politics of what it is that you see all of us doing.
When Mary worked in the White House and they'd have like a senior staff dinner the president was at, he'd like wait for him to come in. He'd always single me out because I knew I was only in. Hey, Carville, come here. Hey, son, did you ever treat Mary Bell? I'm gonna kick your ass. You know. Kind of, but I mean, it was very. Most politicians are kind of personable people. I mean, most of them they would,
I like other people who get politics. And then if you can't talk about politics, then you talk about other things. One time we were in Wyoming, after 9/11, I was read in at a level of security where I had to be with the vice president all times, most times. So we spent Christmas, or I forget what holiday it was, and I see James and the vice president off in the corner talking. I'm like, oh my Lord, what are they talking about? Because they're dead serious and they're staring at each other. Guess what they're talking about, James?
Well, we had any number of conversations. His daddy was a soil conservation agent.
Geological formations of mountains. I'm like, who would have guessed? Okay, so there's.
But they're in Wyoming, and you're trying to say, I got to make small talk. Oh, there's mountains. If it's vice president, seems to be something to sort of talk about. I don't know a lot about fishing, but
it's good. You also write about in the book, rather eloquently, about the difficult times, namely during the recount in 2000 and leading up to and during the first stages of the Iraq War. Take us inside the house, your house. What are those times like?
Thank you for saying eloquently. That's complete fabrication. It was not eloquent at all. It was just flat out. It was awful. If I can remember the phrase, we were like, both of us had our fingers on a nuclear silo, and I thought it'd be better to press the button than to wait this one out. It was a very emotional time, and it stayed emotional, and the emotion was exacerbated by my then going immediately into the White House when the kids were 2 and 5. It's not like he's Mr. Mom. He hadn't, to that point, changed a diaper. I mean, so that was tough. It was tough. what you going to do when you? I loved him, and we just had to work it through, and you can work it through by trying to work it through, or you can just let time pass.
At least we went to war over a war. That was sort of something, if you're going to have a fight, it should be a big thing. We got through it. I mean, I'm a big believer, honestly, in just kick the can down the road. Don't confront stuff. Just go silent for 3 weeks and then let it come around. Because if you start saying what you think at a present time, you might regret saying it some other time. And I think it was Henry Ford that said, or somebody said anyway, you never had to take back anything you didn't say. And for a guy that makes a living,
sweetie, wherever you are, I think that's a wise piece of advice this man just said. We'll get back to the book in one sec, but seems to be some news today. If you were in the position of advising one Governor Christie tonight,
I'll tell you exactly what I'd do. I would go to Fort Lee, and I would tell the people that live there, let me tell you directly, not from Trenton, not from anywhere else, I am sorry. I am the governor of this state, and what happened to you was unacceptable. You are an unacceptable casualty of a political fight. And I think if he did that and was unequivocal, then I think he'll come back from this. But if he tries to do that kind of thing, that some statement he gave tonight, and he says, anybody in my administration that does not cooperate with any investigation, they're fired on the spot. If you have the right to take the Fifth Amendment, you don't have a right to work for me and do that. But the main thing he's got to do is go to those people in that town and look them in the eye and say, what happened to you, who had nothing to do with this? The politics is a bruising, rough and tumble business. I don't apologize for that. But then I think if he does that, he can bounce back. But absent that, because the main thing about this is everybody understands it. It doesn't, it's an easy thing. This is not the LIBOR rate. Okay, this is who the hell knows what they're doing over there. All right, this is not a synthetic derivative that the people that are selling it don't even know what it is. This is like, oh, you didn't endorse me, then I'm going to, no. He can
See, this is how we don't talk about politics in the sense of we're never going to talk about Iraq again or whatever it is, or capital gains tax. But this is the kind of stuff we like talking about, and I couldn't agree more, and we haven't talked about this, and I'll tell you why. We're on Imus tomorrow morning, who's an old, dear friend of ours. And I knew and said at the time to Don, Christie's going to win, even in that blue state, when he went on Imus and said that Corzine needed to man up and just call him fat. Remember he was running those spots with the innuendos, the insinuating, just man up and call me fat. Well, he's maintained that reputation for calling it like it is, and that statement he put out today was not authentic Christie. And people want in their politicians today authenticity. Remember the guy, the Breck guy, John Edwards, everybody loved him. You want authenticity? I can fake that. I mean, no. He needs to be the real him, and that statement did not sound like him at all. I agree with you, honey, completely.
And I've met him a couple of times. We were chairman of the Super Bowl in New Orleans, and so we came down. He came down with the people, and you passed the torch, there's some kind of ceremony. He's really a pretty cool guy to shoot the breeze with for like 10 minutes backstage, and he tells great stories. But this is going to test him because, it's one thing to snap at reporters or other politicians and stuff like this. These were kind of innocent bystanders, and he's got to go full-throated.
Sometimes actors who I've interviewed have told me that they like to switch roles, play a different part. Just to kind of show that they can do it, just to kind of show what kind of actor they are. And so I'm curious, when you're sitting around, understanding that politics is not something you're sitting around talking about, but do you ever take on the, if I was advising Kerry in 2004, Mary, I would have done this. Or if, James, if I were advising McCain in 2008, I would have done this. Is it fun to do that, or is that just hypotheticals you couldn't care less about?
It's not, fun is not the issue, necessity is the issue. If you don't think strategically, like what would they be doing, and put yourself in their position, you can't be prepared. But my favorite thing is, James does a lot of international campaigns, and I used to do them with him, and most of them are in emerging free market reform, South American. So he'd be giving these passionate speeches about cutting taxes and cutting spending and all this. He'd be giving my message, and I'm be still my heart, be still my heart. And so one time he was doing it, and I literally was fainting. I was swooning. He was so beautiful giving my message, so much better than I. And at the end of it, the whole room broke out into applause and Carville for Presidente, Carville for Presidente. Didn't understand a word he said, but he said it so well.
You did a campaign, or campaigns plural, in Israel.
I did, yes.
It was in
I was on Larry King, and he said, what advice did you give Barack? I said, well, down the stretch, I said, look, if we win this thing, we really got to concentrate on the Jewish vote, Really important, Yeah, I've done it. Afghanistan, the Seychelles.
Ukraine?
Yeah, Ukraine. We did that together. I've really enjoyed my...
Is there a specific reason why you haven't done another domestic race?
I haven't worked domestic politics since President Clinton.
Yeah.
Because somebody told me, and it's true, in the United States, once you become a famous person, the only way you can earn a living is by being famous. And but if I did it, first of all, I would be distracted, or it'd be this, it'd be Carville that, it would be, and it was, I had a good career in domestic U.S. politics, and I've seen people stay too long doing something. And I just didn't want to be out in center field having fly balls hit me in the head. And so I just thought it would be a good idea. And I wouldn't return to do domestic political consulting. I'm interested in it. I stay involved. I teach at Tulane. I do all these things. I have plenty enough international work I'll be 70 this year. Mm-hmm. And, I'm satisfied where I am. I'm as Bismarck said,
we're at such a great age here, though. We get to work together for free. There's nothing, people listen to you with, I don't know, with better or harder when they're not paying you. I don't quite get that. It's sort of anti-capitalist to me. But we have volunteered in the strategist who's a Democrat for our mayor. His re-election's at the end of this month. So that's the domestic. We get enough domestic hands on politics doing that and keep doing our own party work. But you can't not do it. It'd be like if you're a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant or whatever, you can't. It just...
Yeah, and I think a lot of my passion has gone into, we moved to New Orleans, and, a lot of it has gone into, it's been one of the most rewarding things we've done is be really involved in the sort of reconstruction and everything. It's been really remarkable to see the progress that's been made so far. It's a really remarkable story. It's one of the great success stories.
Mary, where did the passion for politics come for you? Did it come from your parents?
Democrats? No.
Or was there another mentor along the way?
I grew up in South Chicago, ethnic, working class, steel mills, all that. I never knew a Republican. The college I went to, there were 11 Republicans out of 17,000 kids. I never even knew what one was. But I had and I thought I was going to work in the steel mill, and I probably would have worked in the steel mill. But I'd had this thing when I was 8 or 9 years old. I can remember. I never want to be bored. I never, I don't care what my job is, I don't want to be bored. And the first campaign I ever worked on, like, wow. I mean, there is nothing boring. And one of my early mentors told me the thing about working on campaigns is you get up every morning and you know you're live and you know you're going to do something and you never know what it's going to be. And that's a pretty interesting profession.
Which campaign was it?
That was, we lost. You learn a lot from losing. We always tell young people, do not be afraid to lose. You know, the advice young people are resistant to. But it was a state campaign in Illinois in the late 70s, early 80s.
How did you get into the Marines?
How did I get
into the Marines?
I was flunked out of college and was getting ready to be drafted in the Army, and I had to get the hell out of town because my parents were not very pleased with me, and so I took, the Marines had 2-year enlistment then, so.
What years are we talking about?
Semper Fi, baby.
June of 66 to June of 68.
Oh. Your brother served in Vietnam.
My brother did.
You write about him in the book.
I did, and I was born in Fort Benning. My grandmother was a 5-star mother during World War II.
Your brother's experience in Vietnam affect your political thinking at all?
No, I mean, his, but it was unfortunate. You know, I probably started out kind of more supportive of the Vietnam War. Once 6 months, it obviously didn't end up that way. Mm-hmm. But my political persona was really formed by civil rights. I became a Democrat that just said that black people are just getting the short end of the stick here. This is not right. And that happened in high school. So I developed this beginning, and there was a sort of defining issue. And I talked about it in one of the books, and actually Gary Wills did a profile of me in the New Yorker. And I think what happened, I just got sick of the whole conversation being about nothing but race. I just got, God, could we just talk about something else? Could you imagine like growing up and just this all-consuming, like, geez, can we talk about football? Can we talk about something, anything, you know what I mean? And I actually read To Kill a Mockingbird, and it just kind of moved me, for just a kid, 14, 15 years old. It just really kind of opened up in a way a book can do that to a young person. Mm-hmm. It just hit me in the wheelhouse, or the sweet spot, or whatever it was, and really kind of changed my view. And from that you develop and I grew up in a place that was really interesting because Carville had the largest center in the world for the treatment of Hansen's disease, or what you would think of as more conventionally as leprosy. Mm-hmm. And there was so that gave me a real window on the outside world that most teenagers, my dad was a postmaster and ran a country store, they wouldn't have. So I really had a very fortunate, and I was the oldest of 8 kids, a very kind of traditional French Catholic family up in South Louisiana. Which was actually, Carville was my mother was French and my dad was kind of Irish, Danish, and that kind of thing. But we definitely were a big Catholic kind of Cajun kind of family, and it was a great way to grow up. But I had a great window on the world by growing up in a place like Carville.
I don't want to get too into politics, because people really do have political fatigue. But for all the yabber on TV about Republicans versus Democrats versus that. There was a new Gallup poll out today. Party registration is at the lowest it's been in 40 years. People are identifying as independents. People have a philosophical outlook. What I think has happened in the last couple of years is it's the country versus Washington. There's sort of a detachment. And when I say campaigns are fun, but I'm really, particularly at this age, way more interested in policy and policy impact. And you can see it in New Orleans. You can see if you do this with education, you're going to get this result with this kid. if you do this with the criminal justice, you're going to get this result. I mean, it's important. Politics is important. Policy is really, really important. And our founders, as was the case going back to Socrates and before that, it doesn't work unless there's a virtuous citizen. That's how you make a virtuous state. So I think that's what's frustrating people, giving them political fatigue. It goes to your earlier question. You turn on TV and you hear how ostensibly informed politicians are talking to each other, and you think, what two monkeys arbitrarily throwing bananas at each other could probably hit the mark better.
So with all the yammering on TV for years now, and from whichever side, calling people feminazis or the worst person in the world and so on, is there a fear that the cumulative effect is that the next Mary Matalin and the next James Carville, people who feel passionately about the policies, that they're just going to decide, the next generation is just going to decide, you know what, that's not for me. I'm going to go start up a company, or I'm going to go to law school, or I'm not going to get involved in politics.
Yes, and it is happening, and that's okay. We work with young people. James is a great teacher at Tulane. I'm affiliated with Loyola. We have kids in school, and they think politics is crack, or whatever their word is, okay, crackpot. But they are not engaged. They're both, our girls are highly opinionated. I don't know where they got that. But they do things like they go do light bulb exchange, or they do a lot of civic things. They're very practical. I think why we're so optimistic about the future is because the kids that we work with, these college kids, are going out and they are doing a form of politics. They are improving. They're becoming fine stewards of the country by improving the quality of life by producing things or using their knowledge to make ideas. There are other ways to impact politics than running for office. It used to be the culture determined politics. Now what we have is politics is determining the culture. And my money goes on culture, and it goes on young people.
You know, I'll say this. I'm proud of my life in politics. I'm glad that I had a chance to do what I did. And any young person that wanted to do it and understood, you know, what it was and what it entailed, I would encourage them. And, you know, you're going to have massive disappointments, or you could be like me, I guess, be more fortunate than most. And, you know, I'm happy for that. But I agree with Robert Kennedy. I think it's a noble calling. And, you know, we had you know, one of the things, and, you know, you can blame politicians for this or that, but, you know, what they do is ultimately important. The country's been through a very difficult time. We had a really nasty recession here, and it lasted a long time, and people understandably frustrated, and can understandably be frustrated at public policy, and I get that. But if I look at these young people, and the ones that I teach and the ones that I meet, our young people are a lot better than we deserve. They really are. There's a terrific generation coming up in this country. And people who are pessimistic about the future of this country just don't spend enough time with young folks. And they're out there, and they're out there thinking of things. They're out there plugging away. They're out there doing things. And there's a certain creativity that exists in this country. There's a famous story of a jazz ensemble going, and what China's accomplished in the last 20 years is, you know, one of the great success stories. I'm for trade with anybody or anything like that. But when people get all down, I've always reminded of a jazz combo from New Orleans that went there and played in Beijing's version of Carnegie Hall, and you know, Chinese love jazz. And after it was over, the first question they got is, how did you memorize all of those notes? And to some extent, as long as this country can keep improvising and innovating and doing things, and as long as we got young people, that was one of the great things about the experiences of what I call the great engineering failure, 2005, what you refer to as Katrina, the precarious nature of our culture in New Orleans. We lost thousands of trumpets. And that kind of thing is not, you don't go to the conservatory. You can't go to the conservatory and learn that kind of thing. It's passed down. And we got involved in a thing called Tipitina's Foundation that raised money to give musical instruments to these kids. Mm-hmm. And what really I want to sort of convey before we go to Q&A to you is what's really unique about our hometown is we're not a very significant city in terms of population. Economically, our impact is not large compared to other places. But we are the most culturally significant place in the United States. We have our own music, our own food, our own funerals, our own social structure, our own body of literature, our own architecture. We have everything that goes into a culture. And it was very fragile, and now it's as strong as it's ever been. It's as strong as it's ever been. And anybody that's part of a culture, this is a cultural center right here. This is about culture. And as I get older, I understand that. And I understand the mistakes that we made. My mother grew up speaking French, and I was kind of embarrassed by it. And then we've lost almost a whole generation of French speakers in Louisiana that are not going to come back because, again, they didn't go to the Sorbonne to learn French. It was kind of passed down. And any time that I've really become, in any culture, anytime you lose part of it, it's very hard to get back. It's a very fragile thing. And I laugh, and I'm kind of I'm a kind of a cultural warrior. Now, I'm not about gays or anything like that. It's about the culture we have in South Louisiana and New Orleans, that it's under all of these threats. So that's really what I'm kind of.
And I know you want to go there.
No, that's okay, go ahead.
We would both be remiss if we didn't take this opportunity to thank New York. Thank you really for Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan, every one of the houses came down without fanfare. They're not just money. It's not just checks. They've given people and time and projects and mentorship. And they had the New Orleans Jazz Orchestra came and was sold out here at Carnegie Hall. You've been remarkably generous in your ongoing support in a unique way that only New York could. So you have to, because this is a unique culture. So maybe it's because unique culture likes other unique cultures, but thank you so much for everything you've done to save one of the finest, most unique cities in the world.
You also have the mobile medical units from the Children's Health Fund.
Sure do. Yeah, that guy is amazing.
Erwin Redlener and Paul Simon.
He's been in my house.
They've been in the Gulf ever since Katrina.
Yeah.
You know, they did one. They started with one. Now we have that guy. We have events at the house all the time. Yeah. There were so many smart people in that house. James said, I have to stop drinking. I can't understand a word they're saying. Really? And now there's 50 of them, and that's how we do healthcare delivery now. It's an amazing story. Thank you for bringing that up.
Every once in a while, I get a good one in here. All right, so let's get some questions from the audience. Leads right into it for both of you. Why did you move to New Orleans, and has it worked out the way you hoped?
After I was just really depressed after Katrina, and my wife and I talked about it. We talked about moving out of Washington, and we went down in late 2007 and said, so why not? And she found a house in March of 2008, and we waited till the kids got out of school, moved in January 13th of 2008. And I think it's been a great decision. I've fought and clawed, and I've watched everything against it. In fact, we're going to Washington tomorrow. But we're really happy down there. We really feel like we've made a contribution. I grew up there, there. It's been a remarkable go, and it's where I am. I said when I left, I told the Washington Post, I said I'm just like an old Jew. I'm just going back to Jerusalem. I think, that's great, and you know what I mean. I've really had a good run, but it's just
He's making it
going
sound
back
so
home.
organized. You know, one thing that is peculiar to political people is you have to have a good gut. You just had to have a gut. You had to act on it. You had to trust it. It wasn't like we were planning it forever. But a turning point for me was when the little one of our children, I think I put this in the book, I'm standing in line. She's going into first grade, which is a big deal. And my arms are full of shorts and pencils with pink feathers. Like, what is it? I mean, who has that? I'm looking around for erasers. I'll never make a mistake. What do I need an eraser for, Mom? But so I got my arms full of stuff and this arm, and we're holding hands. And the woman behind me in line, little Miss Perky Ponytail in a tennis outfit, says, "You were such a bitch on Meet the Press yesterday." And the 6-year-old goes like, she squeezed my hand so hard because she knew her mom could blow. And I would have.
This is while you're still in Washington.
This is in Washington. So I just came home. I said, James, I cannot do this to the children. The one that's a liberal is always having to defend Cheney, and the one that's a conservative is always having to defend Hillary. You know, it's like they take on, it was tough on them. Right. So my motivation was in his whole family, all 175 of them were there, and we liked being around family. And then my personal motivation is I want to grow old. I'm 60. I want my third act to be in an exciting, stimulating university-type place that smells good, that doesn't have a lot of liberals in it.
There's a lot of liberals in New Orleans.
But it's a remarkable place. Now, it's working out, but I'll tell you, it had some scary times. And James said, "Sugar, we're about to become a sliver on a river." And I love the way he talks. If you're from Chicago, that's fabulous. And so we were just getting our feet on the ground, and we got Mitch elected. And then the BP thing happened, and I really did. The hair on the back of my neck is standing up thinking about the fish industry. You could feel it all collapsing because with the infrastructure there is still for 650, 700, and what's the population's 400,000. I mean, it was scary, and it was scary to pick up your kids at 10 and 12 and do that. But now that they are ones at upstate New York in college, and one decides she wanted to go to boarding school back in Virginia because, Mother, you just don't provide the structure I require. Now, you say you're from New Orleans and people think you're very exotic. So it's worked out well for them too, I think.
Next one. Are there things that are off topics or off limits topics in your home? Do you discuss / debate policy as opposed to politics around the kitchen table?
I think the honest answer is if it's some political thing or strategy thing, it's much easier for us to discuss. You know, and I think we both realize we're not changing anybody's mind. I told somebody, I'm not changing wives, political parties, or sexual orientation. I'm pretty much stuck with what I got here. You know? And so it's pointless. All it's going to do is just cause. I mean, it will every now and then, but it's not going to change. I'm not going to change my mind, and she's not going to change my mind. I'm not going to change her mind. And so why go through it? It's sort of useless. And I really get the stimulation by teaching, and that gives me a chance to really focus and.
Okay, two things here. Is James famously said, since he's a Zen master of sound bites, because he's the attention span of a gnat. If you are a plumber by day, you don't want to come home and fix your own toilet, right? I mean, we do this all day, every day. I have a radio show with Ariana Huffington, I believe, is coming. We don't want to talk about it. And secondly, there's so many things that we do like to talk about. Why would we? I can think of one time where I tried to have him talk me out of changing my position on the death penalty. I'm now against the death penalty, and I wanted him to talk me out of it, but I think he's now for the death penalty. I think we switched each other by accident, but we only talk about policy if I'm trying to think something through that I might have been wrong about, because I don't always agree with everything I think, but he's not always the best person to argue with, I have to say.
When, through the years, you've been on television, either together or separately, and you've had many years on television, is there an unspoken understanding that there are certain things, there's a line, and you can't cross over that line, whatever it may be?
Yeah, and here's what it is. We only go on with people who are civilized and informed, like George Stephanopoulos. You don't see us a lot together. And our departed best friend, Tim Russert, and we're still very close to his wife and kid. I'm going to start crying. We have Thanksgiving with them there in Columbia now. Tim knew the line. George knows the line. And if we get into a situation where somebody's like, I'm going to put you two in a cage and treat you like ferrets and poke you, we just shut it down.
Right.
Because it might be entertaining for whoever's the stick pusher, but it ain't very funny for us.
No.
Yeah, and I think too, like a little bit of us goes a long way. People say, oh, we see you on TV all the time. Actually, we're on TV together maybe 5 times a year. But for some reason, people kind of remember it, but sure there is. I mean, you know, and it's sort of got to be kind of cognizant of it when you do it. Absolutely.
One thing he did on TV that was over the line, but he and Tim planned this. It was a midterm, and he bet that he was going to win or whatever that happened. He goes, all I can say is I have egg on my face. And he reached down and he broke a raw egg in his head. I had a brand new brown silk pantsuit on, which if any of you ladies know what that's, ruined a perfectly good brand new brown suit, which he and Tim thought was really funny. Okay, that was over the line.
One time I put a trash can over my head, and they started interviewing me with the trash can.
Politics is a rough business.
Look, I'm serious. You don't have to take yourself seriously to take what you do seriously. And I actually like it. You got to understand this. I like politics. I have fun doing it. I like talking about it. I'm not ashamed of it. I'm proud of it. And I enjoy it. And I think it's pretty cool to every now and then be on Sunday morning TV. What the hell? I'll just admit it. You know, and I think it's, I think it's cool to be around and teach young people, and I think it's cool to have, this great wife that I have. I really do. It's good. And I've had a really, really proud of the relationships I forged. I'm proud of the people I work for. I couldn't really care as much about a human being as I do President Clinton and a lot of other people that I've worked for. Mm-hmm. So I've been a really fortunate guy in that respect. And that's why I love writing this book, because it was able to go back and at least for 20 years talk about some of the things. I mean, to be ground center during all of the quote Clinton scandals, to be ground center at 9/11 with my wife in the White House, to be ground center, in the whole Katrina recovery. I mean, some of the really big stories that happened in the country. And to be able to have been there and then be able to relate it, it was good. And that's why I love doing this book. I really did.
Here's what I love about, because I'll say this since they're both no longer with us and they're both New Yorkers. After Tim's show on Sunday, he would always bring out brunchy kind of stuff, shrimp and sandwiches and orange juice and tomato juice. And we had the great good fortune to often follow Senator Moynihan. Mm-hmm. And when Senator Moynihan was there, they would bring out with all of that a bottle of vodka. I said, what are we, chopped liver? So then but that show tapes at 9 o'clock in the morning. So by lunchtime, hey, that was a pretty fun after show with Senator Moynihan.
Another question. Can each of you name one office holder from the opposite party whom you consider to be a reasonable, fair-minded, and effective elected official?
Yeah. Well, I got to give Jeb Bush he's not off the current, but Jeb, I mean, people might be reasonable to me, but in their own mind, I don't agree with him. But I think Governor Jindal is a reasonable guy. I mean, in terms of like, I don't totally. One of those charming people in politics, believe it or not, it's Rick Perry. Now, again, I didn't. If you just for somebody to kind of shoot the breeze with, he's a charming guy. One of the things is you get into politics. I wouldn't vote for him under any conditions. You know, maybe there's 3 reasons I could vote for him, but I can't think of the third. But reasonableness is something that is in your mind, because that connotes like who you are. Haley Barber. It's a good map. I saw Haley, you know, I couldn't think of 10 people that I'd rather run into than sit down and slug a couple of bourbons with, you know? We can think of Johnny Isaacson, the senator from Georgia, grew up as Dad was the biggest real estate guy in Atlanta. And you're not in real estate and politics unless you got some personality. It just sort of goes with it. So I mean, I could go on and on, but reasonableness is in terms of the way that I would view it is, you know, sort of quite differently. But in terms of being like Lamar Alexander, I mean, you know, plenty of people. I could go on and on.
Mary?
It's a lovely long list. Not as Secretary of State, because I didn't work there, but when Senator Hillary Clinton was in the Senate, and one of Vice President Cheney's jobs was to be the president of the Senate, she was one of our go-to workhorses. There's a senator that never promised anything she couldn't deliver. In fact, she always under-promised and over-delivered. We loved working with her. I love working with the party, anyone of any party who does what they say they're going to do. Dianne Feinstein. I mean, I'm trying to think of the guy. In the Poppy Bush years, I had more Democratic friends than Republican friends. They just, I don't know, some things have switched. So I don't want to blame it on the presence of cameras conveying what's going on there, but often what happens behind doors, it's just amusing. It's like a Saturday Night Live. What we would do in the cabinet room, sitting around in a bipartisan way, and then they'd go out and they'd call it sticks out front of the White House, and what they said just happened in that room would be, what universe are you on? So I'd say generally they're mostly people who are very serious about that. I like, who's the other senator from up here? I like her. She's been at the House. I like everybody.
Chris Gillibrand, yeah.
Yeah, I like, you know,
cool. I like
people
yeah.
come, if you like them as people, and you like if they do.
You know people are like Senator Schumer. You know, he's coming at you, man. He's, you know, but he's not
If there's a camera by you, right. You know he's coming at you.
The guy doesn't like. No, he's.
Another question. What is your reaction to the Gates book?
Well, the opportunity is ripe to take a cheap shot, but I'm not, and I'll tell you why. Because I know Bill Gates. Bill Gates is a friend of mine. He's a man of great integrity, and we had in our own administration, as I think has been recounted in many books, myriad fights. I think I even put some in our book. I mean, this is a new threat. No one knows how devastating this threat is more than New York. And the security strategy that preceded it is completely irrelevant and ineffective. So there was a lot of debate going through this. What he had to say there, I think anybody who has any experience in the integrity that Bill Gates has should be heard as we keep trying to work through what this strategy is, because even since we've been out of office, since the Tunisian fruit vendor lit himself on fire, we're in a wholly different situation here, and everything we do to harden the target, they are smart and they figure it out. So I welcome all these voices. I thought it disheartening. I would be concerned were I the president to be the recipient of the opinion that he was so detached from the policy. I find it funny that the press is making such a big deal about all these guys saying they had political positions on, they being Hillary and Obama, about the wars. Duh. You know, that's why it's civil leadership. Johnson it was political for Nixon, it was political for Kennedy, it's political for Lincoln. These are political things, so I discard that. I welcome his policy thoughts and insights.
I'm being honest, I talked to him. I don't know it all sounds perfectly. He said that President Obama, he didn't believe much in his own Afghanistan policy, but in Gates' opinion, all of the calls he made were the right calls. Mm-hmm. Well, of course, I didn't believe that it was going to work either. I never believed in the invasion of Iraq. So if I would have been president, I had the problem, I had to deal with it. Or in Afghanistan, I thought we should have kicked them out and get the hell out of there. And I actually went to Afghanistan. I worked there. But I don't, I understand that from his perfect, and I think he is a patriot. I don't have, he certainly could write the book. But the criticism, I'm not, it sounds, yeah. But in the end, he said, well, the guy, he made the right calls. And so I guess how you get to somewhere or something, and you know, look, there's dragged down bitter arguments about everything, and that's would you really want the National Security Council to always agree with the Pentagon, who always agreed with the State Department? No. And you know, it's so when you look at each of the things that's sort of a part, and then you dissect it, and you know what? It sounds like he's probably telling the truth. And it doesn't sound, and it sounds like I had to, when Obama announces President Obama announces Afghanistan thing, you know, I don't think it's going to work, but I don't have a better idea. That's the nature of when you're stuck somewhere. You know, the nature of being in a quagmire is because it's just the damn quagmire. And, you know, there's no good way out.
This is serious. I want to impress upon this point, even if it's redundant. This is a new threat. It's a paradigm shift. We have not come as a country, nor has the world, to an effective strategic deterrent to this threat. And there should be these internal battles. I can remember being at Camp David, and they were all the principals were screaming at each other, and then we'd stop for a lunch break, have a cup of coffee, then they'd start screaming again. I mean, that if you didn't have that, if you weren't having that debate, those ongoing debates, something would be wrong. And I think we should be having those debates with the other countries as well, because they're making as much progress impeding our safety as we are ensuring it.
Yeah, you know, I don't get into this. I think you got to know this my own view. You know the difference between a situation and a problem. And what we have over there is a situation. And if you try to solve it with a problem and send troops over there, you try to get in the middle of a civil war or something like that, it's just going to be a damn mess. And you just got to manage it. You may not solve it right away, but the stuff that these people are arguing over a period of time is not very attractive. And, you know, civil wars are the most common kind of conflict in the world. We lost at least 600,000 people in our Civil War. Now historians are saying a lot more. And, there's a civil war in Syria now. It's an ongoing civil war in Iraq. And I feel terrible about it. I wish there was a sort of way, and whether the British partitioned it right or ethnic strife or whatever it is. But I'll be honest with you, I'm not for sending. Y'all got to flush this thing out yourself. But it's just what it is.
This is way beyond what it is, because it's about Russia, it's about China, it's about a whole new world order. Mm-hmm. And we are looking, and I'm just making a partisan point, right. We are looking like an increasingly weakened player in what is a global conflict. That's what the...
Yeah, but we are. After World War II, we vanquished the two strongest countries. We vanquished Japan and Germany. China was some backwards place. The world changes. You live in the world it is. We just can't go around telling people, you do this, you do that, you do whatever. We're still, it's just you got to change with the world. We don't dictate. There are other people, and I think to some extent, who knows? It might be a better world, but we can't solve the Syrian civil war. And if we try, it's not going to work. And we got to learn, and sometimes you got to manage situations as opposed to solve problems. I think that's the situation. But we're getting we're going to get into it. Okay, just go have some fun.
I thought we were just getting started. We're coming down the stretch here. So let's get to the important stuff. There was an important college football game played the other night, and there should be an investigation apparently because LSU was not part of it. Now, we're in a pro sports town. Chicago, a great city, is a pro sports
You call
town. Chicago's
the
great.
Giants and a pro team?
I did not say that.
Knicks, huh?
I did not say that.
I got it.
You are taking my words and twisting them, sir. I didn't say they're necessarily...
I feel your pain.
Thank
See
you.
how he does
Thank
that?
You. But I'm going to give you the floor for a minute, and you're on the clock. Tell us about... This is the ultimate softball of softballs. Tell us about the beauty, the wonder, the charm of being an LSU fan. The floor is yours to talk about LSU for a minute. How is that for a softball?
Well, I'll just say this about that. We are... it's really, again, it's a cultural thing. And if you don't grow up in it, it's kind of a hard thing to understand. But it's a unifying force in the state, and it's an interesting kind of history. My entire family goes. It's a culinary event, it's an athletic event, it's a social event, it's everything. It's part of culture. But I'm going to diverse just a second to tell you a story about the Saints because it involves my daughter, and anybody with children understand it. After the Super Bowl, everybody in New Orleans is "Who dat?" And that comes about because the French do not have a TH sound. So the Cajuns call math mat, or they would be who that, say who dat. And so it just became this cheer, who dat. And so, I was going up out the car, and I'd say, who dat, who dat, who dat, say they're going to beat them Saints. And my youngest daughter, who looked up and she said, who dat, who dat, who dat embarrasses me? You dat, you dat, you dat.
He once said to her, does that really embarrass you when you see me? And she goes, Daddy, I just have to think about you when I get embarrassed.
I have to be around.
That's pretty good. Is there, as we wrap up, can you point to, you've led lives, passionate lives in politics, working for your country, and now working for your city, having moved to New Orleans. Is there a moment, and there are lots of moments in this book, is there a moment that you can point to, perhaps when you were working in the White House, perhaps on a campaign, when you were able to take a moment and say, well, it happened. I had this idea, perhaps, of what I wanted to do, and it's happening.
For me, I think that the trauma was when we beat the whole, just kind of the point person in the whole Lewinsky impeachment thing. And then, you know, it started, there were like 3 of us. And I felt kind of passionate about it when it was obvious that that thing was going to be beat back. That was, you know, pretty, God, you know, and that's sort of professionally, yeah, that'd be all right. We've been fortunate. There've been a lot of them.
When you asked that question, my mind went to one thing that was what I hold in my heart as this was the moment. And it was when it was on 9/11 when I got the aides brought me down to the bunker with the vice president, only a handful of us, and we did not have enough connectivity capacity to use any of the secure phones. So I couldn't call. I didn't know, and my kid's school was right by the Pentagon. And here's the moment. I was how many feet underground? I didn't know what was going on overground. My husband was in Washington, on the other side of the bridge, where the kids were. I couldn't call them even if I wanted to, but I knew he was going to get to them. And I knew at that moment, and I know at this moment, that he's a good daddy, and I was born to have those babies. That's a blessing. And whatever else we did in the rest of our life, making those girls was pretty good deal.
Yeah, that was terrifying. That was terrifying. And I'd get a call like about 5:30 in the afternoon on 9/11. I said, Mr. Carville, this is Major Dickerson. I can authorize to tell you that your wife is okay and nothing else. Oh, hi, Major. How you doing there, huh? So that was really the way it kind of happened, you know. Everybody lived in New York as you did, or Washington. We didn't know what the hell was going on, you know. We tend to forget, you know, even something that traumatic.
It's a short phone call, but that's a great phone call.
Yeah.
Then all of our neighbors told me after I finally got home, which I can't remember when. All we knew was James was running up and down the sidewalk with a beer in each hand going, Mary's safe, Mary's alive, Mary's safe, Mary's alive. That's the James I know.
The book, once again, is Love and War, 20 Years, 3 Presidents, 2 Daughters, and 1 Louisiana Home. Thank you for being here tonight.